Top names in the recruiting class of 2009 include guys like Matt Barkley, Manti Te'o, and Taj Boyd. Welcome back to our Recruiting Rewind series with our insider Pete Futek. Pete, let's jump back in the not-so-way-back machine and go back to 2009. Ohio State followed by 3 SEC schools in terms of recruiting that year. Which players were the biggest underachievers?
Well, it's interesting because the players on the top were the biggest underachievers. Matt Barkley, as you mentioned before, was one of the big guys, but the #1 guy overall, Bryce Brown, top running back, considered everyone's perfect All-American, the absolute ideal prospect, could have gone pro early, actually tried to go pro early, ended up going to Tennessee with Lane Kiffin, was a huge get for the program. When Kiffin left, then Brown busted out, left the program, ended up at Kansas State, washed out there. Went to the pros early, just never panned out for the #1 overall pick. The other guy on my list, Russell Shepard. This was an epic class for LSU. Almost everything hit for them, at least among the big guys. Shepard was considered the star of the show, considered the #2 quarterback in the country, but everyone knew he was going to be a wide receiver, a defensive back. Never really panned out, only 6 catches last year. The last guy, I don't want to really call him a bust, I just want to call him a guy who's just not quite made it yet, Jacoby Mcdonald out of Florida State. Was okay his first couple years, 55 tackles in the first 2 seasons, suffered an ankle injury, hasn't been able to come back from it fully yet. He still might be all right, but he's not quite back yet. Again, I don't want to call him a bust, but he just hasn't quite reached the levels he was supposed to reach because he was such a 5-star superstar talent.
You mentioned 5 stars. Let's go back to Bryce Brown, a guy that seemed to have it all the tools to make an impact. You talked about his movement from Tennessee to K-State. Was he just a case of a guy with too high expectations?
At least of himself. I mean, there was talk that he was going to go to the CFL early. There was talk, he was like going to kind of hold out for the NFL early, and that was legitimate. As he's showing right now with the Philadelphia Eagles, he's got the speed, he's got the talent, he's got a fumbling problem, but he shows the skills that made him the #1 overall pick. I mean, this was a be-all, end-all prospect, even more so than Barkley, even more so than Manti Te'o, and he didn't really show it at Tennessee. Had a nice early run, but didn't really show up after that.
All right, so Russell Shepard arrives in Baton Rouge, the #2 rated quarterback in the country, but he never became that real impact player. Les Miles switched him out to wide receiver. So with that situation, you think perhaps maybe Les Miles should have had a little bit more patience with him at quarterback, or is this
no? Because he was never really considered a. I mean, everyone wanted him as anything. I mean, he was the be-all, end-all athlete of this class. The problem was he wasn't really going to be a quarterback, at least at the next level. So the thought process was they're going to make him either a wide receiver or a defensive back. Obviously, moved to wide receiver right away, and he just has not panned out. He just has not been that dynamic playmaker. Again, an epic recruiting class that they had, from Morris Claiborne to Kevin Minter to Michael Brockers to Kiki Mingo, Sam Montgomery. I mean, this was just a massive haul of talent. He was considered the star of the show, though. Didn't pan out.
The stars aligned for Les Miles. He got a great class that year. Let's talk about the overachievers now for 2009, starting with a guy who did pretty good, got some votes there, finished 7th in the Heisman Trophy ballot.
Jordan Lynch of Northern Illinois. He gets not really a thought on anyone's radar. He's offered a scholarship by Northern Illinois. That was it. That's where he went. And, the 137th ranked quarterback in the country turned out to be fantastic. Stephon Jefferson, Nevada. No one wanted him. The Pac-12 didn't want him. It was down between Fresno State and Nevada, and that was about it. Hawaii didn't even want this guy. Turned out to be in the battle for the nation's leading rusher last season, turning pro early. Last guy, Dree Archer of Kent State. Little guy, wasn't really wanted by any of the Big Ten schools, but now it's shown with Kent State that he's one of the most dynamic playmakers in America.
All right, so let's go back to Lynch for a moment. A great 2012, as we all know, combining for 5,000 yards. Exposed a little bit in that BCS game against Florida State, I would say. What would he have done better or been better off going to a Tennessee, a UCLA, or
Sure,
Michigan
but
State?
he wouldn't offer these scholarships. I mean, again, it was Northern Illinois and nobody else. And I don't want to say he was necessarily exposed. I mean, Northern Illinois was exposed. It wasn't really Jordan Lynch. Jordan Lynch didn't really have much room to move. He had one big run, but simply a phenomenal year. Over 1,800 yards rushing, set the record for rushing yards by a quarterback. And like you mentioned before, a Heisman finalist, at least among the top 7. He's going to be one of the front runners going into next year.
All right, Pete, thanks very much for taking a look back at the best and the worst of the 2009 recruiting class. So who are the biggest busts of 2010, 11, and 12? Check back every day as Pete gives us his list leading up to National Signing Day right here on Campus Insiders.